The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
Welcome to Squawk Box Europe. I'm Karen Cho with Steve Sedgwick. These are your headlines. TSMC smashes yet another record, posting a near 80% jump in second quarter net profit as Asia's most valuable company capitalizes on a wave of demand for its AI processors. President Trump reportedly looks to expand military operations in Iran as the two sides continue to exchange strikes, with Trump insisting the US is on the right track.
We'll have Iran defeated soon. They'll be defeated very soon. They had to take tough action because they did not obey what they're supposed to obey.
The pound hits a yearly high, despite reports leader in waiting Andy Burnham will name Shabana Mahmood a newcomer to the brief as his Chancellor of the Exchequer. Keir Starmer bids farewell to MPs in his final Prime Minister's questions.
Every Prime Minister knows when they take up the torch that the day will come when they have to pass it on. That day has come for me. This is the end of my political journey.
Well, we were expecting it to be fairly tepid, and that's pretty much what we've got from the UK GDP figures. The Reuters poll was expecting a year-on-year figure at 1.4%. We've come in at 1.3%. It's a mixed bag on manufacturing. Year-on-year, mildly better than expected at 2.3%, but the May figure is woeful, down 1.8% year-on-year. We'll discuss next.
Just digging a little bit further into the headlines on the UK May GDP. So the number bang in line. We're just talking about a slight increase here, 0.1% month on month. And this is exactly what a poll was suggesting. Don't forget, as we've been talking about events around the Middle East, the AI build out, this is all in the backdrop. And of course, still some tariff concerns globally. So the level of uncertainty in that mix, manufacturing output for the month of May, 0.1%. So that was positive. Expectations were for a decline there of 0.2%. So there was an improvement versus expectations. Construction, that was flat. The market thought there would be a decline of 0.3. So slightly better than expected, but still not growing for the month. Industrial output, again, as we talk about some of those industrial conditions, minus 0.5% on month. The poll thought this would be a slimmer drop of 0.1%. So that is disappointing on the industrial output level. When it comes to what we're seeing on the trade balance, minus 18.66 billion sterling versus a revised April figure of minus 24.5. So let's get into these numbers with Adam Dett, who is Chief UK Interest Rate Strategist, Santander CIB. So just pulling some of the figures together as we've been running through it, we seem to be on an even keel when it comes to the GDP numbers. And in fact, we've defied reality, it seems to be, in the UK. What do you make of the latest headline number?
Yeah, steady as she goes seems to be the message there. As you were reading out the numbers, I was putting each of them really in the context, bizarrely, of the weather that now seems to be absolutely crucial to what's going on at the moment. The construction, potentially heavily influenced by heat waves, just for practical purposes. Similarly, the non-manufacturing output, affecting utilities, how much air conditioning were we running as a country. So some surprises there, given the heat wave we had at the end of May. But that same weather uncertainty, these unprecedented conditions, are going to make GDP forecasting a nightmare for the next couple of months too. So
just weave the industrial output figures together for us, because that's where the disappointment was actually concentrated, the minus 0.5% that we saw. It means the year-on-year rate is now still growing 1% for the year, but not the 1.2 anticipated. What are the factors at play there?
So as I say, weather and therefore power use, absolutely crucial. And also there have been some huge swings in manufacturing. Pharmaceuticals, always volatile month to month. It had a very strong May, very strong April, so expecting a weak May. Car production all over the place. And there you've also got the base effect from last year with the US tariffs. So huge amounts of unpredictability and swings there. And yeah, it still remains a little bit of a lucky dip from month to month.
Adam, as we say goodbye to Sir Keir Starmer and possibly Chancellor Reeves as well, what's the scorecard on their economic performance? You and I had a brief chat before we came on air. I personally look at what could have happened had they not enacted policy as well. I see the role of government to provide the conditions for business in the private sector to thrive, not to drive what they believe should be the economic policy. I don't potentially think they've been particularly successful, but what do you think more importantly?
Well, I'd say the one message we should take from this administration to the next one is almost exactly what you're saying there. Stability, predictability is key. Last year in the build-up to the November 25 budget, I can't remember such a protracted period of discussions. All any client wanted to talk about was what's going to be in the budget, what's the latest move, what's the deficit going to be.
Did it actually come in November in the end? It was delayed, wasn't it?
They delayed. So give us predictability. I know the new Chancellor, whoever they are, is going to have a lot to catch up on, but the more structure they can give us, the clearer they can be early on, the better. It's that unpredictability which has caused, actually, come back to GDP, we've had very weak sort of autumns in the last couple of years and then strong Q1s because ahead of a budget with uncertainty, people just lock down. And then once it's out the way, they get on with doing what they want to do.
And if this is the last days of Chancellor Reeves in her role as well, what would you say were her most notable policies during her 2-year tenure?
Unfortunately, I think the increase in employer national insurance contributions is really what I'll remember her for, as a way of meeting the small print of their manifesto commitments. But was it really in the spirit of no more taxes on workers? And unfortunately, I think that has had a big drag on employment.
So that's the policy that you'll remember most?
That's the one I'll remember.
Me too.
So there's a lot of changes that have been mooted, whether it's tax changes. It feels like there's a reshuffling of some of the deck chairs away from number 10 towards some sort of number 10 in the north. How do we think about what actually should be Andy Burnham's priorities from day one?
Unfortunately, of course, as a markets person, I can't help but think about the deficit, about these policies around tax and giving households and businesses the confidence they need to do their economic lives. But I think maybe not focusing on rearranging deck chairs and focusing on the substance would be really important. And as I say, keeping that uncertainty down. The earlier they can give us some clear messages, some clear direction. I understand why he's had to be cautious in the build-up. You don't want to seem cocky before you're taking office, but the time to give us a steer is now.
Are there areas of the economy that are simply just not firing on all cylinders that could very much have a boost? I mean, BBC is reporting today about a housing crisis that needs to be tackled. Are there areas of the economy that are just low-hanging fruit?
Before Adam comes in on this one, I love this housing crisis. I don't love it, by the way. I hate it. But I love the simplicity of politicians. If we could have chosen any moment in the last 25 years to talk about the housing crisis, and they seem to forget basic economics. If people have a land bank, if the builders or the REITs, whoever it is, have a land bank, they're going to want to maximise the profitability on that as well. In order to take a hit on what they're going to be able to sell those properties for, i.e. create some form of social housing or council housing, they are going to have some form of taxation incentive as well. That's the only way these house builders are ever going to do it, the people who own the land. No government's done that. I mean, Adam, by all means answer Karen's question, but it just seems to me we talk about the housing crisis and we talk about it in such simplistic terms. Oh, build more houses, build more houses. That is just bonkers.
Well, one cause for hope here, I think, is that Manchester has had, by the UK's poor aggregate standards, it's had a fairly successful home building programme recently. So maybe Andy's secret sauce can be brought down to the rest of the country and help to spread that. And again, part of the solution there,
excuse my ignorance.
As I understand it, it is being more flexible with developers over those social housing requirements and getting houses built rather than perhaps sticking to dogma. So maybe a sign there that Andy Burnham is pragmatic and can work with businesses to get some overall results. Reducing
red tape is what we're talking about here.
Being practical, being flexible and not being too ideological.
You are an interest rate strategist. Where are UK interest rates going?
Well, I think the market is very reasonably priced at the moment. As of last night, it was pricing in 2 hikes over the coming year. And given where we are in the Middle East, that's a very plausible sort of central outcome. We're still pretty confident the Bank of England won't raise interest rates. The governor seems very reluctant to. They are so concerned about damage to the economy.
Sorry, Adam, I know it's your first time with us, and I don't mean to be too forceful, because you're doing brilliantly, by the way. Thank you for coming on. But you just said the market's going to have thinks it's 2 rate rises. You think it's a very reasonable assumption. And then you've just said you don't think they're going to raise.
Yeah. So if you think
the market's wrong.
What's the most likely thing that will happen? On hold. When you consider, but all the risks there go off to the upside the longer the problem in the Middle East continues, any other adverse supply shocks. So we could be talking about 4 or 5 hikes in the worst case scenario. So for the market to be, I think 1 is about the right sort of probability weighted average. Understandably, with the recent escalation, the market's gone a little bit to the high side. We were at 2.5 the other day. That was starting to get a bit too spicy for me. But in terms of that spectrum of outcomes, we're in about the right place. But I think the governor will do everything he can to try and stay on hold. They consider rates to already be tight and restrictive, so the bank doesn't need to rush into stuff. And also, in a global context, ECB hiking, now expectations the Fed will hike, whereas a few months ago the assumption was they were just going to cut regardless. So the global monetary policy circumstances are getting that bit tighter. If everyone does a little bit of work, then individual entities such as the Bank of England don't have to work quite so hard.
I mean, it's incredibly difficult for central bankers these days. There used to be a time where they'd look out through the front window down to see what was on the horizon and start setting policy. Now they're looking in the rearview mirror because the policy around the Middle East has gone back to where it was a couple of months ago. They're looking out at the side in case they're going to be just derailed by some other unknown event coming their way, whether it's tariffs or whether they're going to go over a few speed bumps when it comes to other events domestically, politically. And then, of course, this big, huge thing in front of them, this big billboard saying AI investment is coming. So how do we think about some of the short-term inflation shocks we're still weathering, whether that is going to be the Middle East from here and what that's going to do to the economy?
I suppose one of the good read acrosses for inflation in the economy is so far wholesale energy prices, your oil futures in particular, have stayed fairly calm in the face of this escalation. Market interest rates have definitely responded quite forcefully, but the oil market is still kind of looking through this and hoping it'll all go away. And let's all hope that's true. Based on current wholesale market prices, our latest inflation forecast peaks at about 3.7% CPI in January, which is obviously very uncomfortable for the Bank of England. But staying below that sort of magic psychological 4% line, I think, is important and will help with this on hold.
Can I ask you a couple of questions? Before you were appointed Chief UK interest rate strategist, you kind of had done a bit of interest rate strategy, hadn't you, as well? You know, you've been at Credit Suisse, you've been kind of covering this stuff for a while, haven't you?
Yeah.
They didn't just kind of like saying, I don't know, you're a physiotherapist or something. We'll make you the chief interest rate strategist, did you?
Not quite, no.
So you're pretty qualified for the job?
Reasonably.
So why on earth do we think it's a great idea for Shabana Mahmood, a brilliant political operator who has virtually zero experience in the Treasury or with economics? Why do we think it's a good idea to make her the most important person in British economics?
Well, there's a really important point here about the British political system, full stop. It's not just the Chancellor. The Health Secretary is never a doctor. We expect sort of generalists and sort of professional administrators and politicians
really
to become
what you do,
SMEs.
isn't
It is very complicated.
I couldn't do your job.
So there's 2 reasons for hope here. Institutionally,
Okay.
the Treasury's been at it a while, so they've got some good people.
Okay.
And the DMO, the Debt Management Office, have done a really good job the last 2 years.
So what you're saying is the mandarins in Whitehall can steer a newbie, if there is Shabana Mahmood, by the way, around the job.
So I think the most important thing we need in the Chancellor is sort of assertiveness and vision. The institution is very good at what it does. It's forecasting, it's understanding of how taxes work, but you need someone at the top, like a CEO in the driving seat. You don't want a technocrat who wants to get buried in their spreadsheets.
Lovely answer.
Because there's plenty of those in the Treasury already. You need a leader, and let's hope whoever it is. And I think both Mahmood and Miliband have strong reputations as people who get stuff done.
No, that's fair enough.
While we're doing some soul searching on policy and how it's conducted, I want to bring up the Federal Reserve because we heard from Kevin Walsh overnight. Walsh's strategy is to let's not communicate. Let's try and keep mum on all the events that are transpiring behind us at the central bank. And let's actually stop everybody else from talking as much. Quite different to the UK, where we've got this volunteering of information, how every member now thinks about policy as they've sat through the latest Bank of England meeting. Real divide now in how these central banks are conducting policy. Which is the better way to conduct?
As a rate strategist, I love having 9 bullets telling me what 9 people are thinking. I think that is incredibly useful. So much, especially the MPC, it's not a team sport. It really is 9 independent voters with their own views. Knowing what they think is great. But I can see Walsh's point, maybe a little bit too much transparency causes us to overthink. It's also interesting that the Bank of England's communication and other policies is being driven by Ben Bernanke's review, where it seems Walsh is very much, let's go back to the pre-Bernanke era, let's hark back to Alan Greenspan. It's almost like which historical era do you find most inspiration in central banking? Personally, I hope the bank remain transparent and they keep talking, but I can definitely see why from the central bank's point of view, too much talk can actually end up becoming embarrassing.
Do you know what Adam just did? He mentioned team sports. He was the first one to go for it.
Sorry.
Best team
Shouldn't
won.
have done that.
Are we doing that? Are we getting this now? Bit early, but best team won. Good, well done, Argentina.
I don't know the best team one.
Oh, they did. They were brilliant.
Well,
the UK were brilliant.
let's just say I work for Santander and Vamos to España.
You couldn't lose, really. I suppose Spain, really, now. We're all Spanish now. But thank you. That was your first time with it. Did you enjoy it?
Fantastic.
Good. By the way, the worst Chancellor of the 20th century?
This could be fun.
It was, well known that he himself said he was pretty rubbish at it.
No.
Winston Churchill. So he was quite good at stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
1924 to 1929, returned Britain to the gold standard, all kinds of strikes. General strike, the biggest strike in British history, happened on his watch as well.
You don't think anyone's topped it yet?
Well, no, because quasi-quadrangular trusts were 21st century.
Yeah.
Right.
Adam, please join us again. We thoroughly enjoyed having you. Thank you so much indeed. Adam Dent, who is Chief UK Interest Rate Strategist at Santander CIB. TSMC has reported a 77% surge in quarterly net profit, beating expectations by a wide margin. The Taiwanese contract chipmaker, Asia's most valuable company, reported record net profit of 706.6 billion Taiwanese dollars for the second quarter, around 22 billion bucks, US dollars, amid strong global demand from its AI processors. I'm sure you've got a strong view on this one. I'm not going to say anything new that I haven't said 100 times.
We've gone from Europe's most valuable company to Asia's most valuable company today, and the reaction yesterday initially very strong in ASML, and I kept highlighting the reason why, the 2028 visibility. But we saw a fade later in the day, and the view is, look, it's really hard to impress. There's been so much now in terms of trading activity around these numbers, and let's face it, the retail investor was never looking at fundamentals. They hopped on a gigantic momentum trade. So even as institutional traders say, look, there's some good value in the sector, not exactly overpriced at this point, nobody's actually listening because the momentum seems to have come off the trade at this stage. And in fact, some suggestions are it's going to the Mag 7s, the hyperscalers that are spending the money. That may be where some of the momentum might be coming back in from the institution side anyway. So I think how we see this land in the market over the course of the entire day might be quite interesting in terms of just a test of that momentum still.
Yeah, for sure. There is a challenge due to rising component prices. We know that. A related demand is extremely robust. Expect continued strong demand in the third quarter. Do not see bottlenecks for their capacity expansion. Looking to invest another $100 billion in the state, and investment to be in Arizona. I wonder how Arizona feels about the water usage there. The margin in the third quarter, mildly lower than they saw in the second quarter, seen at 65 to 67%, which is still huge, down from 67.7%. So there's a lot in there that they're talking about.
And the demand story, I mean, we keep on hearing from so many quarters that the demand is very strong. In a context where demand is strong, is it bankable for the future? And there's a lot of fears out there that things are getting a bit too hot. But we keep hearing the demand is strong. And the other point is that they're talking about AI's driving CPU demand. We've been talking about GPUs for a long time. Now we're talking about CPUs, of course, as one of the other big features here.
You know, another big problem is the weighting of this sector now. And we've seen it in South Korea, we see it in Taiwan, of course, and we see it in the S&P. I didn't know the answer. I was going to give you a quiz, but I'll tell you the answer, because I didn't know the answer before I looked at it. What do you think the weighting of semiconductors were when we had the dot-com bubble burst in 2008? I'll tell you the answer.
Very, very low back then.
Well, it was quite high, actually. The historical average is 2 to 5%.
There was a bunch of other web
We've done some work on ours. It's actually on the CNBC.com copy. It's a really good piece. So the historical average of semiconductor weighting within the S&P is 2 to 5%. In 2000, when we had the dot-com bubble bursting, it was 8%. So it was massively higher than the lower end, 4 times higher than the lower end, nearly 2 times higher than the top end. What do you think the semiconductor weighting is now?
28%?
Good guess, 20%.
Oh.
So it's huge.
Yeah.
And that's worrying some people. Anyway, speaking to our US colleagues.
Yes, we had a conversation on the channel yesterday. It was a big one. The JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon told CNBC AI will transform entire sectors.
The American economy is hugely complex. I think we spend $4 trillion in capex. You know, AI is $750 billion. You know, it's probably driving it. But you know, when you travel around the world, you know, Andrew, I mean, our innovation here is everywhere. It's in manufacturing, it's in agriculture, it's in AI. Some of that's being driven by AI. It's in the medical profession. It's everywhere. You know, AI itself, the American public says it's going to cure cancers. It's going to reduce deaths on the road and deaths in hospitals.
Coming up on the show, President Trump reportedly leaning towards expanding military operations in Iran as the Strait of Hormuz standoff escalates. Dan will have the latest. And Sir Keir Starmer counts down his final days in office as speculation mounts over who will oversee the UK economy. And we'll discuss the outlook for private markets with Raymond James's global head of private capital advisory, Sinana Sina Haldea. Brilliant guest, 9 a.m. London time. I'm Steve Sedgwick from CNBC, and in my new podcast, Executive Decisions, I ask powerful leaders about their decisions that changed everything.
I'm not frightened of making tough decisions, and I think leadership can be very lonely.
Business leaders should not stay quiet in a world which is super complex.
It is absolutely fine to also change your mind.
Tough calls, personal crossroads. These are the stories that we can all learn from. It's Executive Decisions from CNBC. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. Iran has launched attacks targeting US military sites in Kuwait and Jordan after Washington carried out 2 waves of strikes on Iranian coastal defenses and missile sites on Wednesday. As the standoff over the Strait of Hormuz escalates, the President, Donald Trump, is reportedly leaning towards expanding military operations in Iran. Dan, I don't know what that means. What could that possibly mean, expanding operations? Because obviously at the moment it is air warfare. Are they thinking about something more direct?
There are a whole range of options on the table, Steve. And earlier today, CENTCOM announced just this morning the latest wave of American strikes in Iran has now been completed. US forces hitting Iranian command centers, air defense sites, missile and drone capabilities, and what they called coastal surveillance facilities in the last few hours, basically in a bid to degrade Iran's ability to threaten ships in the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM also saying American forces also struck coastal defense and cruise missile sites on Greater Tum Island during a 90-minute wave. And now the Wall Street Journal also reports this morning that President Trump is leaning towards expanding US military operations inside Iran. That comes after days of briefings from his top aides. According to the Journal, Trump held a Situation Room meeting on Tuesday evening on seizing Karg Island. Remember, this is Iran's main oil export hub and other territory, it says, along the strait. No final decision has been made yet, and the president has, of course, walked back these big threats before. Here's what he said in Pennsylvania overnight. Take a listen.
We'll have Iran defeated soon. They'll be defeated very soon. And then I guess it'll be even better. But, you know, even during this, it's been amazing. I mean, to think, so I call it a military operation, but call it whatever you want. It's incredible. It's like it hasn't made a dent. A lot of people thought oil would go up to $350 a barrel, and today it's at $79. A couple of days ago, it was at $68. It went up a little bit because I had to take tough action because they did not obey what they're supposed to obey. I mean, they just didn't do it. So we took a little action, but it'll all, when that settles down, I think you're going to have $55 oil, which is all great for what you're doing, maybe less than that.
President Trump speaking there. Meanwhile, US officials also tell the Wall Street Journal the other options include sending ground forces to seize Iranian islands near the Strait of Hormuz and bombing a fortified nuclear-linked site called ekes that the US has so far held back from striking. So, as I mentioned, a number of options on the table here. Whether or not the United States actually decides to pull that lever and go ahead with what would be an expanded military campaign inside Iran, or even going the full step, which would be putting boots on the ground, something that we've spoken about over the last 5 months, remains to be seen at this point. As for the Iranians, we've also heard from Iran's top negotiator, who also said overnight that Iran was in basically an essential and existential war with America. Mohammad Ghalibaf saying Iran is prepared for battle, but also ready to use the tools of diplomacy and negotiation to achieve its own national interest. So the situation appears to be getting worse before it gets any better. It's back over to you.
Dan, in the meantime, I can only imagine how difficult it is to be in the government in Saudi, in UAE, in Qatar, etc. Tell me a little bit about some of the initiatives they're thinking about, because there's some fascinating stuff about medium-term rather than short-term ways to alleviate this crisis. And I think UAE has been talking about new ports on the other side of the country to avoid having to go through the Strait of Hormuz.
That's exactly right. And for the last couple of months now, the UAE has been actively building up its own resiliency systems here. Of course, there is the east-west pipeline. There's also in Saudi Arabia, also the port of Fujairah that's been really effectively used to get oil and products to market, bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. But of course, the limited capacity for these additional resilient systems is a barrier in itself. So there is talk of new investment going into additional export facilities in the UAE that would bypass Hormuz completely. And this is how the Emiratis think. They're always thinking ahead of the curve here. So it is likely we will see a build out of these operations to reduce the need to use Hormuz moving forward. Not necessarily a surprise there, but the whole region thinking differently about that critical waterway right now as well.